Hello, marketing researchers. It is Dr. G. Today we are going to discuss population and sample. So now that you have a great start, if you haven't already finished your questionnaire, I want to hone into how are you going to define who you're going to send it to make sure that your sample or your target audience is who you're going to try to reach, and how difficult might that be to reach them. So let's get started. So today we're going to define what a population means and what elements you need to use to identify the whole piece of the puzzle you're trying to reach. Identify also the elements of a sample, meaning your target audience, and then create a methodology to reach the sample, and then practice calculating a sample. So that's what we're going to do today. So the population, when you hear, a population for a research study, we are talking about the entire count of people in a segment for which you are pulling your sample. So this is really can be daunting, right? Because say for example, even you're living, if you want to measure everyone within a city or everyone in a nation, it's really hard to know exactly how many people that is because it changes all the time. So we try to make a pretty good guesstimate. So here's what the example of a population would be. So let's say you want to understand all of the opinions of the students on your campus. So how do you go about doing that? Well, the first thing you need to understand is how many registered students there are at the time you are to doing your research. So that might not be really easy to do. I mean, all of you students should be calling up the admissions and asking them what the actual number is, but you can, go to this number will be on your college's website. And then so let's say for example your population you've done your research is approximately 12,000 or estimated to be 12,000 students. So those are all the potential people that you have to reach out to it. It's the whole. So we take a sampling of that population, which is any subset, so it can be really small or really large. But what we need to do is we need to get a sample that's small enough to be manageable, meaning if you have thousands and thousands and thousands of records, you're going to have a pretty strong database for your analysis. Or you can just do what is statistically significant, a rather smaller sample. So you kind of have to decide based on how important your information is to decide what that size will be. So in marketing, we usually have like a 95% confidence interval, and we'll talk about that later. But let's look at the difference between a marketing research study is about business, is about whatever that goal is. And in marketing, generally, we're not we're looking at attitudes in opinions, likelihood to buy, things that are not so life or death related. So we use on average a 95% confidence interval to see what our study is. However, if you are in the medical field and you're testing a new drug, you are going to want to make sure that you are very, very confident. If it is a life and death situation, you're going to want to be maybe in the 99% confidence interval. So that's kind of what you need to think about. So my example here is, okay, so you want to understand the opinions of your students on campus. Maybe you're looking to you want to know what their opinions are on online versus in-person classes. So your population is all the registered students. I have a population estimate of 12,000. Now your sample is going to be the number of students responding to that survey. So you're going to take a subset of the population, and in this case, in order for us to have a 95% confidence that the actual number falls 5% below or 5% above that number, we would need 373 students. So don't get freaked out. I'm not going to make you have a 95% confidence interval on our practice, but I am going to suggest that you get enough surveys to be able to, for us to be able to run some correlation and regression later on. So let's talk about a sampling frame. Now the sampling frame is the source material or device from which the sample is drawn. So a sampling would be a complete list of everything you want to study. And that could be something like all the students in this class. The frame would be all of the people enrolled in this class. You could do a list of students in high school, a list of loyalty program members from an airline, list of high schools in your town. St. George, Utah is where I live. List of registered voters in Washington County. So that's the frame is discussing the population, a list of everybody who will be sampled. And obviously, I'm not going to ask you for a list of names of everybody in your college because, of course, nobody will give them to you. That's confidential information. But you need to discuss the frame. Okay, so our definitions of samples. The first one is random. Now, a random sample is selecting a sample from your population in a way that every single possible sample that could be selected has a predetermined probability of being selected. So how do you do this? So you're going to take that group of people and you're going to randomly select one to send to. And then we're going to go back to the drawing board and take a second and a third and a fourth up until you get your number that you hope to get a good response rate. Now, a simple sample is that each member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen for the study. This means it guarantees that the sample chosen is representative of the population and is selected in an unbiased way. So, for example, you're going to randomly select somebody, and then you're going to go back to the same bucket and pull it again. And then the same bucket and pull it again. So you're not throwing away any of those that may have been already selected. Now, a voluntary response sample, which is often used in marketing, is that there's a sample made up of volunteers compared to a random sample. We're going to take a population, people from a population that maybe have signed up to take surveys, or people have raised their hands and say, yes, I will do this. So voluntary response is very common in our discipline. Now, a convenience sample is drawing from people because it's easy to get them to do it. So a convenience sample for me would be, okay, I do a lot of consumer research, as you know, and if I could possibly, go to all of my students in all of my classes and ask them to respond to a survey, because guess what? That's easy, right? You're all in my classes and I'm the professor, and, maybe you want to look good and you're going to take the survey, even though it'll be anonymous. A convenience sample is, everybody in my social networks. So something that's easy to do. Now, a systemic sample is some sort of ordering to choose the sample members. It may be something like a random method or some method that has a predetermined process. So say, for example, you're going to take every fifth person on your list, every first person in the population. That would be systemic. Now, cluster means that it is certain populations. It has a specific format required to obtain an appropriate sample. And though the sample cannot be accurately gauged, it's not thought of as accurate because it's not as a random sample. So it's taking your whole thing and then sampling from a particular cluster of people. A stratified sample is one that ensures that subgroups of a population are are each equally represented. So let's say you want a certain population from each age range. So you are going to send the surveys out to get enough people for each one of those age ranges so that you can understand, make comparisons between them. It's something that I like to do when I'm doing anything with demographics. Graphics is making sure I have enough in each one of those categories. All right, so here's an example of a convenience sample. So in my case, when I was seeking people to help me with my dissertation, when I was in my doctorate program, I went out to those people I used to work with because it had something to do with the sample that I was in. I needed to work with manufacturers, people who had worked in the manufacturing industry. So I went to my own people I knew and I emailed them the survey and asked them to help me participate. I've also done I've done this with many some student samples, consumer samples. So this is an example of easy to get, likely people you know. Now let's switch gears a moment and talk about sample size. So the sample size is basically the act of choosing the number of observations that or replicates to include a statistical sample. So our goal is to make inferences about the population. And in order for us to make inferences about the population, we have to be confident that the sample we pull is valid. So the first thing that we do is we look at the target population and we estimate that. So how many people are there? Then we use what's called a margin of error or a confidence interval. And how much error do you want? So meaning you've got that number, and the number is going to be either plus or minus 5% is what we use in business. If you were doing, a medical study, you might be in the 99% confidence interval. So you have to decide what the mean should fall in that acceptable range. And that generally goes on how important the decision is to make. There is also a standard of deviation, which is the variance between the answers, and a safe case in business is 0.5. So when you are going to let's talk about the confidence interval. Now remember, the result is a plus or minus X percent, and it means the accuracy of the reported statistics. So let's look at this little example that I have here. A news story reported, who do Utahns spend their money on for Mother's Day? 82% of Utahns expect to buy gifts for their mom, compared to 20% for their wife and 15% for their mother-in-law. So in terms of spending, Utahns expect to spend $93 on their wife this Mother's Day versus $58 on their mother. So we want to find if these findings are accurate of plus or minus 2.75%, 19 out of 20 times. So this is an actual survey that I found. So for example, if you use a confidence interval of 2.75 and 82% of your sample indicates they buy a gift for mom, you can be 95% confident that if you're using a 95 or 99, that all the questions in Utah, somewhere between 82% and 84.7%. So you're going to do a minus 2.5 and an addition of 2.5. So this is the range that the actual answer would fall within. Now let's talk about the confidence level. The confidence level tells you how confident you are on this result, and it's usually in a percentage as opposed to a numeric number. So in this case, if we want to be 95% level, that 19 out of 10 times would fall within this plus or minus confidence interval. So the confidence interval together, you can say 95% is the true population that will buy a gift for mom. Sorry, I messed that up. So confidence intervals, confidence intervals, wider confidence intervals, plus or minus X%, increase the certainty that the true answer is within the range. So as you can see here, if we widen this, let's say this is at a 95% confidence interval, which is plus or minus 4.75. If we widen this to like maybe 85, the wider the confidence level, the less likely the actual number will fall somewhere between that. So a smaller confidence level is you're going to have wider. When the cost of error is extremely high, you might do a 99% confidence interval. And I would do this if you've got a life or death situation and so what we do is we increase the sample size. To be able to get a smaller or a larger confidence interval. So if 99% confident that it will fall between those two, and in this case, a smaller sample size would be probably an 80% confidence. All right, so how do you go about doing this? I know this is a lot to consume, and it will make more sense to you once we start analyzing the data. So how do you go about calculating a sample size? Well, there's 4 things you need to know. You need to know the population. You need to know the margin of error, the confidence level, and the percentage value the P is your beta So I have a little calculator for you here that you can use to determine your sample size for your project. It's right in Qualtrics on their website, and I chose this one because this is a survey tool we're going to be using. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go into that particular link I have here, the confidence level calculator. So I want you to put in a 95% confidence level because that's generally what we use in business, particularly marketing. Population size, so you're going to estimate that. Your margin of error, which generally we use for marketing, and it's going to give you your ideal sample size. So let's just take a look-see at how this works. So I had already given you an example of 12,000 students in a school. So maybe I want to know something about, let's say, how anxious are people during finals week? Maybe that's my question. So how anxious are people during final weeks with the population size of 12,000, my margin of error, so you can change these here. We're going to use a 90%. So in order for me to have a 95% ideal confidence size, it's going to be 373. So if I widen this, remember if I widen, I need 375. Okay, so let's say that's if I want it to be stronger. If I increase the population size, I'm going to be more responses. My population size, isn't going to change. If I want my confidence interval to be 90%, you can see how that goes down. If I want it to widen it to 99% or shrink it, it will be 629. So we stick with a 95%, and your margin of error, lots of times you'll see plus or minus 4%, like if you're doing a political poll. But I want you to go in here and use this to determine for me what the sample size is. And there'll be a little bit of an activity for you to do on that. But you will definitely need that for your project. Okay, Another way you can do this is you can just there's all kinds of sample size tables out there. I have one from SurveyMonkey. So let's say you want a plus or 5%, your population size, we'll use the 10,385 at a 95% confidence interval. All right, so that's what you're going to do. How many people should I ask to take my survey? So this is what we call response rate. So you're going to want to get to that level. Remember, in my case, it was 370. So the higher the response rate, the fewer people you need to follow up with and ask to take your survey. It's that simple. Make it good enough where you're going to get a good response rate, and make sure that that intro is punchy enough where they're going to want to take it. So for example, if you need 100 responses and you expect a 25% of the people invited to take your survey respond, then you need to invite 400 people to take the survey. So it follows this nifty little simple formula here. And this is a response rate we use for campaigns and everything else. So the number of respondents you need divided by the expected percent of response rate times 100. So I know that was a lot, and I garbled a little bit of that information on there in my voiceover. So please just be careful with looking at what the slide contents say. So have you determined the population of your study? I want you to do that. I want you to be comfortable determining the sample size. Don't get freaked out. I know you're probably not going to get 370 respondents. I have students who have. I did a consumer research study using my own sampling methods a while back, and I got 5,000 in no time. It all kind of depends on the interest level of your subject. And can you calculate the number of people you need to reach out to for your sample size based on a particular response rates? Those are 30 things I need you to take away from this. We will get more into the nitty-gritty statistics when I get into that analysis section. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me in Canvas. If you're interested in learning more from the Marketing Doctor, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic day.